Hi, Justin. I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to be able to speak to you today. Thanks so much for taking the time. By way of introduction, maybe you can just give us a bit of a glimpse of what people can expect going into Ellis Park. Quite different from your other films, Nitram, True History of the Kelly Gang, obviously a documentary. What can people expect going in?
It started off as a sort of wildlife documentary and then turned into a music documentary and then turned into a kind of biography of kind of Warren Ellis, this extraordinary, musician and artist who formed the Dirty Three and then is also an integral part of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And it became a kind of many things. It's a very funny, beautiful, kind of moving, painful kind of documentary about this extraordinary park called the Ellis Park. It's a wildlife sanctuary in Indonesia where these extraordinary people care for and rehabilitate and try to get animals that have been smuggled out of the country back into their home again, back into the wilderness. And it also sort of charts and follows Warren Ellis, who became an integral part of that park in supporting it, developing it, and it sort of charts his musical sort of history and also what sort of led him to, be part of this extraordinary sort of place. So, at times it's like this wonderful adventure story and you sort of get to meet this sort of very funny, charismatic, amazing, extraordinary person and you get to sit and watch this incredible music being created just for the film. Warren writes a lot of extraordinary soundtracks. And then, probably most importantly, you get to meet these extraordinary animals and sort of characters in this wildlife sanctuary that, I guess, restore your faith in what we as human beings are sort of capable of.
And what was the starting point? As we were just mentioning there, obviously you've done a lot of fiction work. Did you always have in mind you wanted to make a documentary like this? And how did the collaboration begin with Warren specifically? And I guess, like you say, it's so many things. Did you have an idea in your mind of what it was going to be? And did it become something very different in the making of it?
Yeah, I met Warren at the Cannes Film Festival and he was there. He composed the music for Snow Leopard. I was there because I had a filming competition and we sat down and it was just really a catch up. And he said, I've been really prolific through COVID. I've kind of, been part of these making of these albums and soundtracks. And, I've written a book called Nina Simone's Gum. And I've also supported and kind of funded this wildlife sanctuary called Ellis Park. And I was, the last bit, I was quite sort of shocked by and amazed by and very curious as to sort of how he came about it. And then discovered that he hadn't been to the park and that, a lot of the correspondence and a lot of the kind of interaction that he was doing with the park was, via Zoom and via FaceTime and stuff. And he said, because of COVID, I haven't been. I'd really love to eventually go. And I said, I'd love to film that. I'd love to film you arriving at the park for the first time. And he said, you know what, like, let's recreate this sort of 8-foot, kind of 2-meter representation of Nina Simone's Gum that I sort of stole underneath her piano when I saw her in one of the last concerts. And, let's do it out of Italian marble and let's roll it up the river and arrive at the park. And there was this very kind of Herzog Fitzcarraldo kind of vibe about it that I was so intrigued by and thought was kind of quite amazing. And that didn't happen. But what did happen was this really beautiful, intimate kind of story and film that started about, about grief and about love and about sort of childhood and about how, humans and animals repair themselves and how they, decode, I guess, trauma over their lives. And it became this very personal, beautiful kind of human sort of story, about Warren and about Warren's journey to the park and then, what he witnessed and what he saw at this extraordinary place and how these animals had this, an enormous effect on him.
And thinking of the sort of the form the final film takes, it's sort of beautifully freewheeling. And I think there's even a line that Warren says sort of halfway through of, we're supposed to be going to the park, but actually we're doing all these other things. We're going on all these tangents, it's sort of everything all at once, everything's colliding. And it feels like the film itself just allows that all to happen and to breathe, and for these moments to sort of happen quite spontaneously. So was that something also quite intentional that seemed to reflect well Warren as a person and all these different elements he wanted to show?
Yeah, every time I tried to put a saddle or reins on this film, it bucked me off. Like, it was a very sort of naughty film in that it didn't want to be, it didn't want me having ideas kind of forced upon it. And I had many ideas and many kind of thoughts about, because this was my first documentary, and I kind of make fictional films, and there's a kind of a very particular kind of vision, and you're really trying to kind of recreate something that's in your head. Sort of discovered very quickly was that I just could not rein this thing in, and that actually what was happening in front of me, what was revealing itself, and what was there sort of every single day sort of became the story. So it got me very much in touch with being in the present as a filmmaker, and being really open and receptive to kind of what may come. I love that. I love that process, and it's definitely affected the way I've made a film since, and a series since, and there's something about not knowing what's going to happen in the day, and being open to anything that does sort of free you up as a director, and it certainly did that for me. It's got a lovely energy, the film. It does feel like a kind of a wonderful adventure, and you don't quite know where it's going, and you feel like you kind of packed your bag with Warren and you're sort of traveling with him, and I sort of love that feeling about it.
I guess some of the sort of standout moments, I don't know what those were for you kind of on the ground, but certainly hearing him, the interactions he has with his father, sort of thinking about his relationship with his mother, talking a lot about trauma, and maybe for the first time it feels like in front of the camera, kind of reflecting on all that and unpacking it for himself. So were those some like very key moments for you as well?
Yeah, I just think this really fluid conversation I started with him, where you sort of almost forgot that the camera was there. We had a very talented cinematographer, Jermaine McMicking, who makes everyone feel incredibly comfortable, and the camera always feels ridiculously invisible. I think there was a general trust between the three of us to have very open, raw, and fluid, and sort of unfettered sort of conversations about everything. I learned an enormous amount about myself, and there were definitely things that were, had happened in Warren's life, and that were kind of, a creative energy that was sort of formed in his hometown of Ballarat, which is this country town, quite sort of isolated, that really, connected to me. Like there were really similar sort of things. So it just opened up this wonderful, ongoing, investigative kind of reaching conversation that kind of really easy, and a lot of that had to do with, I guess, Warren being so so beautifully brave in trusting us, and actually wanting to speak about difficult things, and about it's two men that are sitting there talking about this stuff, and men don't usually talk especially in Australia, and especially of a certain sort of generation. We don't sit around and talk. We talk in code a lot if we're trying to kind of suggest sort of intimate things, and it was really refreshing and really interesting to be able to kind of sit amongst another peer and another male and another Australian, and be able to kind of talk so freely about all sorts of things, and I really appreciated that about our relationship, and also what he gave to the film.
Coming to the sort of musical elements, I mean, it just feels so fascinating that, the different elements of that, the music that he's composed for the film, but also kind of getting an insight how, the process of creativity and, the roots of that, of, writing songs and making music with his father, his relationship with Nick Cave, that moment when he is talking about, seeing Nina Simone and how transcendental he realized music can be. So is that something amazing to capture, and I guess for other people to almost get a bit of an education of how these sort of musicians become who they are and how they make the music that they make?
Yeah, that was a really lovely surprise that those conversations happened, which to be honest, happened very naturally with Warren's sort of father, where he was in this really amazing place, was very kind of transparent and open in regards to talking about how he created his own music and his lyrics and his songs. And there was just some really lovely, interesting things and insights that, were coming from a man who was in his 90s that just felt so present and real and contemporary. That really sort of fascinated me. And then act of creating, that act of being able to kind of, come up with, a stem of a piece of music, trust something that's sort of speaking to you and you don't know where it's sort of coming from. I was really interested in that. Like, I really wanted the audience to kind of understand what that process is at times, especially in terms of Warren's world, which is how the soundtrack formed. It was it literally was stems of a piece that eventually sort of formed after the making of the film, that were just sort of like little diddles and kind of improvisations that then sort of started to breathe and get oxygen and sort of form their own structures. And I got really excited that the film was almost becoming a kind of active exploration of creativity in not, hopefully not in a pretentious way, hopefully in a way that sort of sees how the things that perhaps you don't see, the things that you're sort of trusting in the shadows a bit, are actually really important, and they are sort of speaking to you in a way. And to be honest, I found that really present in the park as well. This sort of the park was incredibly creative. It was incredibly musical. There were kind of birds and primates and mosques and all sorts of sort of sounds that are around that place. Just the energy and the vigor in which the park was created, and the relationship between the people and the animals. There was a very similar sort of creative process going on, and an energy that seemed to sort of overlap in a really kind of cool way.
And ultimately, in that sense of kind of weaving all these different things together, what do you hope people will take away from kind of having this, couple of hours in Warren's world, hearing about his journey? There is probably something there about redemption, like you said, about creativity, about, connection with people. So, what do you hope people take away?
Firstly, I hope it's a really entertaining journey for people. Like, I find it really funny. I find Warren really a wonderful kind of explorer into Sumatra and into this incredible place, and introducing us to these incredible people. I also think it's got a heart. I think that there's many things that people will see in it that remind them of themselves and their own challenges and their own sort of journeys. And I was deeply moved making it. I laughed a lot making it. I was incredibly moved and inspired by this park. I was wowed by these animals, and I was sort of, shocked, I guess, the most awful things that humans can do. And then I was also kind of just surprised and wondered by the best that we can be. I think the film has a great heart. And then I hope people kind of watch it and kind of go, wow, what an amazing place. I actually want to support this. And, all these people that are working at Ellis Park are the ones on the website, are the ones kind of, asking for support, are actually the ones that are spending all night, second night, third night with a baby primate, making it feel as comfortable as possible and trying to rehabilitate the people understand that they can support this, and that and that their support is going directly to the people that are in the film. I think that hopefully they see that as a really worthy thing to be sort of part of.
And finally, what does it mean to you to have the film screening as part of LFF? And if you could just say a few words about, I know you've had the Order in Venice. What's coming next for you?
I don't know what's coming next. I've had a very busy sort of couple of years. Sort of after COVID, I got really scared about not being productive, and then suddenly I was doing things over the top of each other, and it was wonderful. Like, it's actually been a really inspiring and productive kind of time. I'm so excited about audiences seeing it in London. I think that I think people have a lot of affection for Warren in Australia, but especially in London as well. It's the first international festival, played here at the Melbourne Film Festival. I don't know, I think that hopefully it brings, a great smile and makes people feel, that they can do things. And, and I've enormous respect for the festival, and I'm deeply, deeply honoured that it's being invited. And, I hope people come along and see it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all that with me. Huge congratulations on making something so moving and, like you say, also funny and inspiring. Huge congrats. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks so much. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.